Hey guys, welcome back to more coworker stories. In this video, my crazy coworker shot me after I exposed her for defrauding customers. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a petty revenge story. So I was backpacking around Asia and ate at one place all day. Not the cheapest and it looked nice, so I thought I would treat myself. Forward to the middle of the night and I wake up choking on my vomit. I throw up more than I've ever done before. My whole body was convulsing. I was in and out of consciousness because I was fainting and shaking and sweating and crying. I also started pooping. This whole time I physically couldn't move because the vomiting was so intense my whole body spasmed. So basically I was puking into my mattress and I was also sharing a room with 6 other people. They were not pleased but couldn't do much to help. I threw away the blanket and sheet, but I think the mattress needs to go as well. I paid extra cleaning costs, of course. So I've thrown up before, but that night was such an agony, and the only thing I could think about other than desperately wishing for death was that I had paid for this experience. The next morning, after a night of no sleep and lots of vomit, my body was in pain. I could barely walk, but I knew I needed a pharmacy or a doctor or just some kind of help. I was alone and a young female in a foreign country. The pharmacy was a 100-meter walk away and I literally crawled there. Once there, they sat me down, gave me fluids and meds and sorted me out. It had been an hour since I last puked and could walk about 50 meters back to the room where I needed to sit again. I was outside the restaurant that did this to me, so I went in, leaned against the counter and said, "You gave me food poisoning, please give me a refund." Very politely, and I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist. They were rude. They said I was lying, that I never ate there, that I paid in cash, so there was no record that I was even there. I showed them the receipt and they said the man that served me was not there, so they could not issue a refund. I was not expecting them to, but I wanted to let them know how unwell their food made me, but when they started being rude, I wanted revenge. I could feel more vomit brewing and knew I had about 3 minutes left. I could have left the restaurant, asked for a bin, even found a toilet. I made the decision right there and then to let nature take its course. I vomited all over their floor, mostly just bile, but a sip of water I had managed to drink as well, at the feet of the rude staff member. I looked them in the eyes and said, "Here's your proof, I paid you for this, I need to lie down," and promptly left. They were stunned to silence and watched as I shakily walked down the road and into the hostel. And by the way, ripe stars, that reminds me of a funny story that I had happened to me around 2018. So basically back then I was already living in Thailand, but I took a mini vacation to India. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but I am a huge foodie and wherever I go I try all of the local foods, even in India. So pretty much I ate as much street food as I could, and usually I really have what we call an iron stomach in my family. I can eat whatever I want, I never have diarrhea, never have any issues whatsoever. And I was in India for maybe, I think it was 7 or 8 days, and I was really surprised that I did not have any stomach issues, considering how people always say that they always have diarrhea after going to India. So then, after returning to Thailand from India, I was eating at a local Thai restaurant in the morning with my girlfriend. We've eaten at this restaurant dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, and I never had any issues. However, that day I had to puke so badly and the restaurant staff was like, "What the hell? What did we do? Was it our fault?" And I told them, no, don't worry, it's not because of you, it's probably because of India. You know, I felt so bad for the restaurant chef and the waitress there because they are such nice people, it's a really local restaurant, but I assured them it had nothing to do with their food, it was just the aftermath of being in India for too long. Anyway, OP in the story further said, "ETA, I've edited to address a lot more of the recurring themes in the comments. So firstly, I'm certain that it was food poisoning, not just my stomach not being used to the food or picking up something on my travels. I had been backpacking for 6 months at that time and had my fair share of stomach upsets which calmed down after a couple months. Secondly, I'm also certain that that restaurant gave me food poisoning. I cannot explain well, but you just have a feeling what food it was that makes you feel so unwell. The thought of it makes you nauseous. If you have ever had severe food poisoning before, you will understand." I'm not exaggerating how unwell I was. I've had food poisoning before, but nothing like this. I did leave my hostel room as soon as possible, but my body was spasming and I couldn't even sit up to move, let alone climb down the bunk bed and into the toilets. There was nobody else in the restaurant. I was not planning on going in there, but on my way back from the pharmacy, I needed to sit down and was literally next to the place, so thought I would just tell them that their food made me ill. I didn't expect to get a refund, but I thought I would ask. I would have left it at that, but they were incredibly rude to me and I'm not the type to argue. I was gonna just leave, but felt the vomit coming and realized I wouldn't have made it back to my room, and I would rather not puke in the street in front of lots of people. And lastly, this is a petty revenge subreddit, people calling me an a-hole, bitch, entitled tourist, etc. I cannot say I would have done that if I was in my normal state of mind. At this point I was dehydrated, weak, sleep deprived, and admit that my decision making probably was not ideal. However, in hindsight I feel that we are even now. They gave me a night of hell and I gave them a bottle of puke. And the next one is the title story, which is titled Insane Coworker Shot Me After I Exposed Her for Defrauding Customers. Compared to a lot of people here telling stories, I have a relatively boring job. I work at a call center for an extremely large retail chain. I won't say which one, but I'll say it's one of the biggest ones in the world. I tend to take calls from unhappy customers that want refunds and direct them on how to do so. The most interesting calls I get are from people wanting to report an employee for something or another. The only actual thing of importance about my job is the fact that I had a coworker named Stacy who felt that since it was such a big company, she could get away with doing some things on the side. Now, Stacy was not friendly or the type of person to get along with anybody else on staff. We had a tendency to take turns bringing in things like donuts or some coffee on Fridays, and Stacy would enjoy it but never actually be the one to take a turn bringing anything. She is that type of coworker. At one point we had to move desks around and closer together because of some work being done on the ceiling after a leak. The closeness sucked and I ended up sitting right next to Stacy and overheard her on a few calls. Every 10 calls or so, she would seem to push the customer to give the full credit card info used to make the purchase, which is something we never ask for. To make it worse, I could clearly see she was even writing it down. I will admit that when she went to the bathroom, I looked at that notebook and saw a ton of credit card information going back probably months. It was not enough to bring to my boss and cause any type of investigation. I was also worried I would be the one in trouble for looking at her personal notebook. Instead though, I went to my cousin who was the eccentric cousin in our family, and he talked about the dark web and crypto a lot. I asked if there was any way I could find out if she was using the cards or even selling them, and he told me that he could look into it, and I gave him some information I took a picture of with the card info. 2 days later he sent me files showing that the card information she had taken that day was being sold online. I don't know how he did it, I'm a little scared to find out or do any of my own digging into the dark web. Well, I take the evidence to management who are not happy, and they called Stacy in to talk to her. Since I filed the complaint, I was willing to stay and show my proof to her directly. I knew she was a jerk, but I didn't think she would go crazy once the information was put in front of her. First, she started to cry and claim that I had framed her, and I was the one probably selling information. Her desk was ransacked and the notebook found with the stolen card info. They told me that the police would take it from here and let me go back to my desk. Stacy had another idea in mind and went into her purse. She pulled out a small handgun and without really aiming took a shot at me. I froze like a deer in the headlights, as many others would probably do. I didn't even have the instinct to duck out of the way. The good news was that since she did not aim the bullet, it only grazed my arm and went into the wall. The gunshot rang out and scared the entire office, who were hiding under desks and calling the police in panic. Stacy clearly did not have any experience with a gun, as upon shooting it she dropped it from the kickback. One of the management members in the room grabbed it before she could, and we all waited until the police came, with the only sounds coming from Stacy still yelling it was my fault. And I was screaming in shock that I was shot, something I'll admit to not having any shame about. Before they got there, I guess something clicked in her mind and she ran out of the building. I remember the EMTs coming in and bandaging up my arm and asking if I wanted to go to the hospital. I said no, but my boss wanted me to go for insurance purposes. I went despite wanting to stay and finding out what was gonna happen about Stacy. I was far too invested at that point and knew the hospital was gonna say I was fine and to just keep the small graze wound clean so it didn't get infected. The police arrested her on the credit card stuff and the incident of shooting me. I might have missed something, but the full list of charges was something like credit card theft, credit card fraud, identity theft, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Basically, Honestly, a lot of things. The big deal with the credit card stuff is that it is a federal crime type of situation, and while I didn't see them or can confirm anything here, I heard the FBI came to the office and raided her areas and took her computer. It was serious, and you know that it is when the fact that she shot somebody was probably the least of her concerns when charges were considered. She attempted to claim it was all a misunderstanding and that I was trying to get her fired because she was better than me. I had to give in all of those files showing her selling the cards and explain to the police that my cousin did it for me, which caused him to get questioned as well. I still feel bad that he got dragged into it all. Nothing bad happened to him though, I just didn't want him to deal with it all since the last thing the family needed was him going off about some random conspiracy theory to detectives. The dark web is apparently not as hard to find and mysterious as I think that it is. The police were able to use what I had to find more sales she had done and the payment transactions that she had tried to hide by moving the money around a bunch. Instead, she agreed to plead guilty and avoid the spotlight and a trial where she could get a lot worse. Plus, I'm sure the company was glad to not be in the spotlight and having customers worry. She got several years in prison for everything, and after a long time things finally started to settle down at work. I also got a raise, which despite them saying was for being good at my actual job, I believe it is just for catching the fraud and not suing the company for me getting shot. Either way, I will take the extra money. I complained for years before this about how my job was boring, but now I think I'll be thankful if nothing of excitement ever happens again at work. Edit, people are asking if the company just brushed things under the rug, and they didn't. Once they could get a hold of it, they contacted everybody in her notebook and warned them about the fraud and to change their cards. And the next one is an HR malicious compliance story. And by the way, if you have watched until here and enjoy my daily stories, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we are getting closer and closer to 130,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. So, like some of my previous stories, this tale revolves around my time as a supervisor in a call center. An employee who did not like me called James and my malicious compliance with HR. James was a new hire, probably about 21 at the time, a young kid whom, you could tell, grew up privileged and entitled. But hey, I did not do the hiring and everyone deserves a chance starting out somewhere. I just wish this guy was hired somewhere else. Now, I prided myself as being a fair guy, friendly and understanding. James, however, was always the victim and nothing was ever his fault. Customer complained on his service, not his fault. Incorrect information given, he was told the wrong information. Called off, something had come up beyond his control. Oh, and on it went with him. Nothing ever his fault. The issue with me came to a head when I corrected him on a call that he took. The information he gave was so incorrect and potentially damaging to the client, I had to call the client and give them the correct information while apologizing for the misinformation. And well, company policy at the time caused this to be an automatic write-up. I brought James to an office, door open mind you, to tell him that he was being written up and why. At first, it started with every excuse in the book, and then it started with him asking why I was being hostile and mean. I wasn't, and why I was yelling. Again, I wasn't, and the door was left open, so there would have been multiple witnesses. He refused to sign the write-up. That's fine, it would go in his file regardless. As we were done, he marched up to HR, and about half an hour later, HR called me into their office. They asked me why I yelled and cussed at James. What the hell? Now my bad for not having another sub with me when writing him up, but everyone would have heard me yelling had it happened. I'm a big guy and my voice carries. I denied this, of course, and HR told me they were throwing out this write-up since to them it was not a big issue. This act basically neutered me, which caused a ripple of effects. It was now known if I did my job, HR would just reverse anything I did. HR also told me from here on out if James had an issue or infraction, they would handle it. Okay, so here's where the malicious compliance comes into play. They had zero idea how many side conversations and other crap I had to deal with when it came to James. Needed to call off? Sorry, go talk to HR. Got a complaint? I would tell him to go to HR and I would send them an email why. Requesting a day off to HR you went. It became a fact that HR had to deal with him once to twice a day for months. Anything even slightly minor, I sent him to HR. I know it was driving them insane as they hated to be bothered. Finally though, HR asked me to have a meeting with them. They told me James called off and he was gonna be put on a final and they wanted me to do it. I reminded them that they asked to be put in charge of him. We came to a compromise as I wanted to play nice and said that we both would. James was brought to the office and told he was being put on a final for attendance. But it was not his fault. He cried, he had to go to the doctor, HR HR asked for his doctor's excuse. He said he would bring it tomorrow. The next day, James came into HR and said, "This is not working out, I quit." HR got a hint of what I dealt with and the trash took itself out. Basically, I love the justice. The next one is titled, "I caught my neighbor's son stealing my underwear." I moved into the apartment at the start of January, and since then I've been convinced that someone is stealing my underwear, bras, etc. Every floor has a pair of washer and dryer units, and since moving in, I've had almost a dozen different things just disappear from the washer or dryer. The room is so tiny that there is nowhere to sit aside from sitting on top of one of the machines, so it makes it very hard to wait for it. 2 weeks ago, I went and bought a bunch of new things, and when I went to go remove stuff from the washer, I noticed that several things I had just bought went missing. Armed with this and the fact it was early Saturday morning, I went to our landlord and she was able to tell me during the 35 minutes of washing, the only person who entered was my next door neighbor's son. Now, at this point I was furious and confronted the parents. The parents called me a liar and basically told me off. They absolutely refused to believe me, however, since confronting them, I've had nothing go missing since then. Today I put laundry on and started cleaning my unit. When I went to go drop trash off, I checked the laundry and discovered our neighbor's son going the dryer I was using. I again confronted the parents and they immediately started screaming at me for harassing their son and threatened to call the police on me for harassing their son and threatening to sue me for slandering their son by implying he is a pervert. My question is, does this count as theft and can I go to the police and file a complaint? I don't want my clothing back at this point. And a user in the comments asked in regards to the "I went to our landlord and she was able to tell me, how did she know this?" Then OP answered, "Sorry, our building has a video camera on each floor in front of the elevator and the laundry room is right next to it. She was able to fast forward the time in which I dropped my clothing off and was able to determine it was only him." And now we got an update to the story and it reads like this. "Thank you to everyone for pointing out I was an idiot and I should have called the police to make a report. Long story short, I went to the station, made a report, gave them all the details I had along with showing them a copy of the security camera footage of both incidents that my landlord was kind enough to send to me. The police officer did not seem to really care from my impression, but he made a report and no one to my knowledge ever came out or anything. Anyways, today the father and son came to my door and he basically apologized for accusing me of lying and made his son apologize to me, which was awkward, and gave me a bag consisting of my clothing. I told him I did not particularly want that stuff again and was going to throw it out. Just the idea of keeping it made me disgusted. So the father kindly gave me the cash value for a rough estimate of the items and then some, and then told me if stuff goes missing to come to him first. I am satisfied, I guess. The entire situation seems extremely uncomfortable and awkward. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I'm not sure if I was in OP's shoes, if I could have really handled the situation any better. Sure, I mean, you can instantly go to the police, but in the end, once they give you your stuff back, there's not much more you can do, right? At least nothing I can think of from the top of my head. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. For once I am going to actually tell a story where even though I am in an HOA, my issue was not made worse by them. I don't know if this is because I'm just lucky or if because in South Africa we just have better functioning HOAs. My neighbor, on the other hand, is a piece of work and I cannot wait to tell you about him. First of all, from the minute he moved in, he started walking around both of our properties and trying to see something that I figured out later was which land was bigger. It turns out it was his, but only by a tiny bit, so it was really just so he could brag he had more property than I did. So right off the bat we are dealing with a self-centered kind of guy. He did have a wife, but she did not really do anything, so she is not part of this story. I wanna start first by explaining the way our land is in the sense that it is on a hill. Both of our houses are on a hill, so the driveway to the road is very slanted. Right away, he wanted to get work done on his driveway so that it would not be as steep of an incline. This alone was not a bad thing because I could understand it being hard to get used to and wanting to try and fix it. The thing is that the way he had done it caused water from the side of his home, where the driveway was, to now filter into my land. As you can guess, I was not happy about this and told him off for it. It was legally done though, so I could not really do anything about it. I did not think about what would happen in a huge rain and just knew in normal small showers it was not affecting my yard too badly and did not reach my garden. Then this guy really got started and decided that he was going to build a pool. Again, seems innocent enough on its own. Due to his land being on a bigger slope, there was not an option of building the pool in the middle of his backyard. Both of our backyard lawns are shared and there is no fence between the two. I wish I had put one up though, because I knew it. His pool was in the middle of the property line and now on both of our properties. This time I was furious and knew there was no way this one was built legally. He told me I should be happy and grateful because now my property will look more desirable. Of course, I was also told it was his pool and I better never be found swimming in it. Not that I would have wanted to share a pool with this guy anyway. I was going to call the city code enforcement on him because I knew it was illegal, but before I could do that I found out we were due for a bad storm. Waiting a few days surely could not make much of a difference, right? Wrong, because it was a huge rainstorm and because he did not do things up to code, the pool quickly flooded and started going down the middle of our properties and down the hill. But wait, because it gets worse, and if you remember what I said he did earlier, you might have picked up on the reason why. If not, that's okay, because I'm gonna say it anyway. His stupid driveway repair that now filters all of the water going in that direction right onto my property. It was a total disaster and there was nothing I could do but sit and watch until the storm was over. The water was flooding my property and my garden was soon underwater and everything in it ruined. My car ended up getting picked up from the water and started going down the driveway and towards the main road. I had no way to stop what was going to happen, and that feeling of being powerless really is the worst. When the storm finally ended, I was able to go outside and see the kind of damage it all caused. My house took on no water, which was just a miracle, but that was all I could be thankful for. My garden was ruined and nothing was left alive after being drowned. As for my car, it got drifted all the way down to the main road where it was smashed against a road barrier and totaled. Not only was it smashed, but it had so much water damage it was not safe to drive. I was so angry at the neighbor for both things he had done and I wanted revenge. We have had worse storms here and I never flooded because of the natural hill shape that was not altered until he showed up. Added with the extra water from his pool making the entire thing worse, I called the code enforcement people and let them know he had an illegal pool on his property. I also called the HOA about both the pool and the damage to my house because of his driveway alteration. He wasn't happy when they came and saw his illegal pool and he was forced to remove it or somebody would do it for him and charge him. The pool was gone in a couple of days, but there was still the matter of the damage to my property. For the HOA, he had to pay a huge fine for doing the things without any permits or asking permission from the HOA to alter the land. As for me, that matter ended up going before a judge because he was claiming my property damage was my own fault and had nothing to do with him. I pointed out his driveway change and how it forced the slope to bring all of the rainwater right towards my home. I had video of the garden flooding and my car being carried away to the main road. I also wanted money to repair my backyard area that was dug up when he illegally built himself his pool. At the end, he was forced to pay for the yard repair and to pay me what the car was worth. As for the garden, that could not be priced, so I was forced to take the loss and deal with that myself. That is not the end of the story though. I started filing building permits and getting permission from the HOA and the town to build in my backyard. Yep, I was building a pool right in the view of the neighbor, so he could look at it every day and know what he could not have. Of course, I was playing it safe so it would not send water to flood anything again. He was angry at the pool because it meant he could not show off that his house and property were better than mine. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.